So what we're going to be talking about tonight with all of that is this big idea that we've got to treat not only the mind, but also the body and the soul in order to help people truly heal from trauma. How many of you know Houston has a human trafficking problem? Yeah, so here's some interesting bits of information. So some people tell me, especially whenever I do this presentation, not exactly this presentation, but whenever I talk about human traffic awareness to chambers of commerce and business groups, I'll get this question: what's the difference between human trafficking and prostitution? And sometimes they'll even admit to me, they'll say, well, I've never encountered somebody who's, every girl I've encountered, and I'm like, don't buy sex. That's number one. Anytime you buy any kind of sex, you are contributing to the problem. But here are some basic definitions. One is considered the oldest profession, the other is modern slavery. One is economically driven by the woman's choice in some way. I believe a broken person's choices in some way. And human trafficking is economically driven by others. In fact, they are being used for the sole financial purpose of those who are trafficking them. And then one is the woman is really in charge of herself and her own money, and the other was in charge, has no real decisions to make in order to survive what she's going through. Sex trafficking, here's the legal. Sex trafficking is a commercial act. That means there's some kind of something of value that's traded in some form or fashion, induced by force, any of these, not all of these, induced by force, induced by fraud or coercion, or if it's a minor, they're automatically considered to be forced or coerced, just because they're a minor. Recruit, so if all you do is, so we've run into women who've been trafficked earlier in their life, and in the later part of their life, they've been caught up in being arrested for the laws they have to do with trafficking, and their excuse is that their job was to go out and find girls who might be wanting to work. That's recruitment, and that fits under the laws of trafficking. So recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing them for sex, or obtaining them is all sex trafficking. Forced labor or service through use of force, fraud, or coercion, and involuntary servitude, peonage, debt, bondage, or slavery. So that's the legal. We had Congressman McCall over to our office last week, Michael McCall, head of Homeland Security. Him and Ted Poe have been on the front lines trying to push legislation. They've authored or co-authored 5 major bills to give our law enforcement more teeth to actually end this modern day slavery. Here's what we know about Houston. First of all, human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry in the world, and it flips back and forth. What's number one? Which one does it compete with? Drugs. So it's drugs or sex trafficking. 27 million persons are believed to be trafficked worldwide. Texas is the U.S. hub of human trafficking. We have been in first or second with number of people rescued from human trafficking since they started keeping track of this about 5 years ago. So Texas is the hub. 25 to 30% of all U.S. trafficking victims flow through Texas, and Houston's the Texas hub of human trafficking in the U.S. and in Texas. Between 300 and 400 brothels in the greater Houston area. So what are brothels? Let me just run through a list. Well, let me give you this. Estimated 300,000 minors are at risk or are being prostituted in the U.S. And the average age of debut as a sex trafficker, their first trick, is somewhere between 12 and 14. And the average victim forced to perform 20 to 48 times daily. So this is their life. Here's where it occurs. So strip clubs, spas, massage salons, modeling studios, tanning salons, cantinas. They'll buy drinks at a higher price, and the more they drink, then eventually they get to have the girl. Does that make sense? So they buy the girl through the drinks, and there's a place in the back. Tanning salons and spas and such aren't the spas that you probably go to, but they're a spa that usually has some kind of way of being distant from the front, so a locked area. And so somebody pays for the room, as it were, and then they go back and then they pay for the sex back with the girl in the back, if that makes sense. And really, any place that you can somewhat legally get naked is where this happens, as a front. But look at this, hotels, even some that we stay in. So in yesterday's paper was an article about a young lady who was rescued from human trafficking, who's now suing Hyatt and others because they knew that it was just gentleman after gentleman coming to their club, come to the front desk, get a key, go. I mean, not to the club, to her room. And so she's saying that Hyatt made money off of her as well as her pimp. And I'm really interested to see where it goes, and I'm hoping that our hotels will pay attention and try to keep themselves out of legal trouble and set up policies to recognize this. Apartments, residential houses. So it may be happening in your neighborhood. So there really isn't any place in Houston that's not a possibility for this to happen. And between 300 and 400 means it's probably happening somewhere near you. So it's a big problem. And I put on here Backpage, Craigslist, and others. These are places that advertise sex, and legally they're advertising sex under the freedom of, what is it, the First Amendment? The freedom of speech. Thank you. Yeah. So there's advertisements in there, and then there are actually sites, multiples of them, where somebody can go buy sex at one of the brothels and can go online and rate their experience there and tell about it. Then other people who are looking to buy sex can go read their reviews and decide to go there. And so we've got to find a way to shut this down. Yeah. So the agency that I have the opportunity of running and that I have the privilege of running is called Shield Bearer. Think of the stories of David and Jonathan when they were young. And there's a great story of them doing well together. And then there's this one story in 2 Samuel, a chapter where Jonathan and his shield bearer, armor bearer, go up on the Philistines. And then the next story is more about David and Jonathan. So we think it's David who was his shield bearer. But shield bearer is someone who is in the fight with you. It's your fight. But we kind of got your back, and we're going to keep you armed. And that's what we feel like we're doing, and joining with people who've been through trauma or in a mess in some way in their life so that we can help them. We were focused on relationships. That was our area of expertise, family relationships, couples. And Mission Sci-Fair came to us. We're out in Northwest Houston. And they said, we really need some help. There's this group called Redeemed who were going and visiting spas, bringing them breakfast and all, and slipping them notes, hoping that they could have them rescued. And they got one. And they said, we need help because what we've been doing is Bible studies and, 3 hots and a cot and teaching them, getting them to all of the things at different churches in town and just loving on them. And for some reason, it's not working. And they said, we need some help. And I looked at it and I thought, how in the world can we do this? So we've already been working with, at that point, crime victims and people who experience horrible traumas. We've worked with people who are veterans and some active service personnel around trauma. And now we're being asked to do that. So I thought, we've got to get some expertise in. So I started looking at what does the literature say? And what's amazing is there's not a lot in the literature about this particular population. It's just limited. So we started partnering with others to try to find a way to get some education. This field is full of good-hearted people who want to do good things for this population who don't have the training of the people in this room. Most of the people in this field don't have any counseling experience or education. And so it's a lot of people trying to do the best they can. Since we started doing this and we brought in experts to train us, and then we've continued our training, we've worked with these groups. So YMCA International, raise your hand if you know YMCA International. Couple. So that's been primarily internationally trafficked folks that we've worked with. Freedom Place, Arrow Project and Freedom Place. Home of Hope. We got Redeemed Ministries. I got one. The Landing. Yeah. So since they started, little Natasha, she had her baby, I think. It's due anyway. Little Natasha came to me and she said she wanted to put in a drop-in center for like streetwalkers and such to find human traffic survivors. And I was just like, good luck, honey. I'll pray for you. A couple years later, she started it. And we've had a counselor in there since we started. And Elijah Rising. Yeah. And so in some way, we've either provided counseling services to these groups, to the population that they serve. Some of them are minors, some of them are adults. To their staff, and or trained and consulted with them to build better programs and held their hand through some ups and downs as they worked. Almost all of these programs have some residential component. So they have residential components. To date, we've served 200 minors and women who are traffic survivors, and approximately 75% domestic and 25% international. So let me stop there and see, are there any questions about human trafficking that perhaps I can answer? All right, we're going to move on. So what do we know in the field about trauma recovery that might work with this particular population? What do you know? What do you know about helping people with post-traumatic stress disorder? Yeah, so just some basic trust and rapport building and some kind of alliance. What else? Yes, so we want to somehow, what's called systematic desensitization, we want to somehow take them from an affect that's out of control to something that they control in proximity to the thing that's triggering them. So we already knew some things as clinicians at Shield Bearer, but how do you deal with people who have trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma? So we went to the experts. So as I mentioned, we were challenged by, this field is challenged by good-hearted interventionists trying to do the best that they can. There's limited research with the complex for trauma recovery. And so we found Dr. Benjamin Keys and Dr. Lee Underwood up at Regent University and had them come in, and they are finishing up a Christian-based, evidence-based a study with this particular population, and I'm going to run you through it tonight, the HEART model. HEART stands for Healing Emotional Affective Responses to Trauma. So that's what that means. And we've continued. So with the general things we know about how to work with post-traumatic stress disorder treatment, and I've really moved more and more into working with the body in treating PTSD, not just working with the mind. We brought in Bonnie Martin multiple times and sent staff out. Bonnie is with Shared Hope International. Shared Hope International were on the front lines in some of the long-standing refugee camps related to our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and worked with people who had experienced complex trauma, both what they fled and then the nightmare of living in a refugee camp. We're here to save you. We're going to lock you up. And even some of the UN and others, we had rape issues and all kinds of things back in the day. Dr. Dan Sartor has this whole body of research on interpersonal neurobiology and attachment, and we've had some training with him. So how does the brain do attachment, and what happens when it's a mess? Right? When attachment is broken and 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 broken. And how do you repair the mind so that it affects the brain so that you can have somebody who operates well? EMDR, anyone familiar with EMDR? Is an approach that came to us really through the military and then came out that way, dealing with PTSD. And so we've got several folks at Showbear are trained in EMDR. And then DBT, which had its birth in working with borderline personality disorder affected people. So imagine this. As I met Dr. Linehan early in my career, but she was up in New York and trying to figure out a way to help this population. And she just told the world, she told everybody, send your borderlines to me. Let's have them all live together. And she had to find a way to help with emotional regulation or to treat emotional dysregulation. And this is what came out of it, DBT. So let me run you through the HEART model. Let me give you this before we do that. So let me give you this model of the brain. So make a fist. Y'all look mean. Okay. Put your thumb inside your fist. So this is a model of your brain. So your arm is the brainstem, and your thumb is the emotional part of the brain, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, all of that, the amygdala, which goes off in me quite frequently. And then this is your neocortex, and this is your thinking rational part of your brain. So what happens is that all of what we experience in life comes through into our brain, through our senses, into our brainstem, actually flows through the emotional part of our brain before it hits our thinking part of our brain. And we interpret what we feel, if that makes sense. We get to decide what we feel. Like, I'm having a baby. It's so exciting and scary. And I'm getting married. Those are both emotionally show up in the same way, excitement and anxiety in our body, if that makes sense. And so the emotional part of our brain almost acts like a sonar or a radar that's searching for anything that may harm us. And whenever we experience something that harms us, all of the resources of our brain go to that emotional part of our brain, and it actually creates distance between our thinking part of our brain. So it's almost like we've flipped our lid. And now what we're doing is feeling, at least for a few seconds, as the adrenaline is dropped and others. And so we're like that. A good 30 minutes, all that's running through our body. So imagine, if you can, a child who is abused, in every way and neglectful, and this has been their life. They do well at school, this is their life. They don't do well at school, this is their life. And then they have, at age 11 or 12 start being pimped out. And now this is their life multiple times every day. And eventually, everything in their world is triggering them. Does that make sense? That arousal part of the brain is just like that. So how do we take that brain and get it to a point where it can be like this and touch peace and have room for joy and all? That's what this is about. So you start with the person really finding safety physically and being in a safe place. Let me go over this heart model assumptions. Mind, body, and soul composes identity. So all of those components compose our identity. Most of what we're going to work on in the heart model is our core identity wounds and the affect of those core identity wounds and modulating the affect. Victim's identity, body, and mind are impacted by what they've experienced. Holistic step-by-step process is vitally important. So talk therapy alone isn't the answer, is what I'm saying. And we've got to encompass the person with all of the resources that we can to help them go from living like this all the time into something that's more within normal range. So the heart model can reach the depths of emotional experiences. So we are going to go with them into the darkest places to see what we can do to hold their hand in those darkest places and help them feel peace in that. Resolve and restructure cognitive distortions. And so think about CBT here is what we're dealing with. So I am here only for others' pleasure turns into I am invaluable, turns into the core wound of I am invaluable, turns into also that everyone only wants to use me. And so we've got to start with where they are, get to that core identity, do some work in the core identity, and build out from there into something that resembles not distortion, right? That gets closer to the truth. And then reframes the affective responses. So using some switch technology to take what they're feeling and help them also feel something else with that. So the first part of it starts with safety, orienting them and preparing them for treatment. That includes having them in a safe environment. Many times the girls, the minors who are rescued or the young adults, safety is not at their home of origin, if that makes sense. So for some family member who says, let me take you, maybe part of the problem, they got them in it in the first place. So we've got to be careful. Sometimes residential is preferable to a family member. Other times we work with some who are with family and a healthy family or a health approximating family. You want to build a therapeutic alliance? Somebody said that. So we want them to feel like we are with them and give opportunity for them to be open to letting us be with them in it. Crisis stabilization in every way. So what we're doing with crisis stabilization is sometimes uneducating and re-educating them to a new set of rules. So I think about, I'll just call her Jasmine. I met Jazz, I was walking through the reception area and the executive director of Redeemed was in there. And she said, hey, Roy, I want you to meet Jasmine. And I said, hi. And she was uncouth. She was unkempt. She looked very uncomfortable meeting me, whatever, uncomfortable around healthy males, I guess you might say, whatever health I'm in. She was, her grammar was bad. Her teeth were messed up. So, she had the telltale signs of somebody with zero to no confidence in herself. So that's how I met her. A couple of years later, I was passing through our lobby, and this lady who was sitting up proper had on a nice skirt and a jacket with her skirt, looked nice, hair all done, makeup on, teeth, good teeth. She said, Mr. Roy. And that's when I knew she was with them, because they all say Mr. or Mrs. the first name. So, Mr. Roy. And I said, hey, I didn't see you. What's going on? And she pulled out of her purse her checkbook. And she said, look. And I looked, and there wasn't anything really to look at. I just looked at her checkbook and patted her on the back. And I said, that is awesome. And I went on where I was headed. And later, the counselor who had been working with her came in and said, thank you so much for encouraging Jasmine that way. And I was like, well, so what was that about? She showed me her checkbook. So that's the first time she ever owned her own money in her life. Young, maybe 25, young. And so her story is, before the age of 5 or 6, she was abused in her home and neglected. Her mom addicted to drugs. And by the age of 11, other men were also using her, probably to pay for mom's drug addiction, right? Somewhere around that, a boyfriend said he would take her away, but he's a man. So her boyfriend at 11 or 12 was a man. Mom said, that sounds great, go. And she ran away with him, and she started being tricked out the next week. So she lived from then all the way to about the age of 22 in an environment where her job, her way of living and surviving was make the most mature and experienced person in, I guess you would call the stable of women of her pimp, happy. Make her happy, and her life gets better. Do whatever she wants, and her life gets better. So her and the pimp had complete control over her. So her job was to be compliant at all cost, right? And when she wasn't, she learned pretty quick, that's what you want to do. You get safer and healthier places to work if you do make her happy, and if you don't, you get on her bad side, you can really be in dangerous situations all the time. So that was her world. And she jumped out. To get through, they used drugs to help manipulate her, and she also wanted them. And so she in a brothel law enforcement action, she jumps out and turns state evidence on her pimp and some of the different brothels here in town. And she came to Redeemed. And then I met her like the next week. So imagine a world where all you have to do is make two people happy, and they use you, and you service sometimes 40, 50 men a day. And that's your life. That's how you survive. And she came into an environment where they were saying, yeah, we'd like you to get up at 8, but you don't have to. No, you can't have any of your drugs. Well, we have rules at our house. We have Bible study at this time, and we have prayer at this. Do you see? And so we've got to create an environment that helps uneducate that way of living is no longer necessary anymore. I remember one, I won't mention its name. one that worked with minors that was in a mess, and the girls were in full rebellion at their facility. And whenever I went to try to understand what was going on, the staff were trying to turn the screws on them with more and more rules and more discipline to try to get control of the situation. And that's exactly what they were used to, right? So the girls had somehow trained the staff to treat us the way that we know life is. Are you following me? Instead of the staff providing an environment that helps them unlearn and relearn the way that most of us in this room, I would say all of us, know that our actions in this world actually have some effect on the world. That we can affect the environment that we're in instead of it all being done to us. So it's a long process, and it begins with safety and creating an environment that they feel safe in. So crisis stabilization, having good skills for crisis stabilization, where there isn't an amping up of power to the responses, the PTSD-like responses they have. And then system mapping is both trying to understand kind of where they came from and how they got into the system, although you're not going through the whole thing, but also helping them understand that this isn't going to be over in a week. This is going to be hard, but we're going to be with you. And here's the way forward. We got to get a hold of this. And we want to help you be successful. And so they can see where they are, and it's not a surprise to them. Let's see. There was something else I wanted to say. Yeah. So here are some of the specifics to the first stage. We want them to participate in the treatment plan, which means that they're going to want to leave, which means we're going to have to be supportive and helping them know that that's normal, and that just because you want to leave us, we're not leaving you. If you have a program that treats this population and you kick them out every time they do something, then you're just you're messing with the attachment stuff that you want to treat. So you've got to have a way for them to be a part of it, and that we're not going to kick you out for that. Goal setting and boundaries, both. So we start with where they are, not where most humans should be at their age. We got to start with this girl that I was telling you about. Think about this. She was out of school from like 5th or 6th grade on. No wonder her grammar wasn't that good. If she had been in school, she'd have good grammar. But her grammar wasn't that good. I did that on purpose. And then setting boundaries, both that they're in charge of their body and nobody else is, and that they're not in charge of anyone else's body, that they're in charge of them, and trying to start with some basics around boundary. It's amazing. In the first 6 months, there's a class that we do. It has a little DBT in it and has some boundary work in it. Looks a little bit like some of the stuff that you'll see in the codependency literature sometimes, but at least early codependency literature. Anyway, so we're doing that group, and there are tons of ahas. Oh, that's why I did that. Oh, that's why somebody else reacted the way that they did. There's these ahas for them all the way through. And then we're working with all kinds of responses. Can you imagine what they look like when you first meet them? Where they fit in the DSM? There's no one diagnosis. And PTSD doesn't cover it. There's addictions, and and they may look bipolar when they come in, and after a period, you start to see that maybe they're not bipolar. So you may start with the meds and then titrate them off and see. We don't prescribe meds, but you know what I'm saying, right? Okay. So use a lot of different strategies for acute stabilization, which may mean a quick visit to the psych hospital, get them de-escalated and get them back. Skills building, tons of skills building, starting with some basics around how do I build my day, what I want my day to look like, how do I make goals, etc. And physical goals within these. And then using anxiety and stress management. So we want to help them slow this so that they're able to interact with the other ladies that they're working with and with the staff. Any questions about kind of stage one? Stage one can be six months to a year, so it's not the first week. Keep going? Okay. So I want to tell you a story to kind of illustrate where we're going with this. So y'all promise not to tell anyone, right? I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to reveal something really about myself. So whenever I was a young married man, my wife and I would have disagreements, and I thought it was all her. Anybody else relate to that? So, anyway. So one day I opened the shower curtain. It was a shower curtain back in those days. Opened the shower curtain and I turned the water on, and I got hit in the back of the head with a bunch of cold water. Turned the water on so that I would get the shower hot water headed that way. And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, my wife probably doesn't know that our little dilly dauber. Anybody know what a dilly dauber is? It's the little thing that you pull up so that the water comes out. It's not its official name, but I'm not a plumber. So open the shower curtain, turn the water on, and it stays up, and so it just hits me in the back of the head. So I had a conversation with her about an hour later, because I get up about an hour earlier than her. And I had a conversation with her, and I said, "You're not going to believe this, but this morning I got hit in the back of the head with cold water whenever I turned on the shower." And she goes, "Oh, what happened?" I said, "Well, our little dilly dauber's broken." So I took her to the bathroom and showed her my dilly dauber, which would not work in most audiences. Anyway, so I showed her that how you put it down, and so that she would know. And she's like, "I'm going to try to make sure that doesn't happen again." A little bit later, I went and opened the shower curtain, and a couple of weeks later, and I turned the water on, and bam! Right in the back of the head, I got hit again. And so I was frustrated, but I still wasn't like that, right? And I shaved. I have to shave like, you know. So I shaved, and I got in the shower. I make breakfast for my wife almost every day I'm in the house and bring it to her in bed. No joke. So I brought her breakfast. I said, "Well, we're eating breakfast," and I told her I got hit in the back of the head with cold water. And she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I do that? You know, I promise I'll do my best." About 3 weeks later, it's the coldest day in January here in Houston, which is not that cold. Anyway, I opened the shower curtain, and I turned the water on, and bam, right in the back of the head, I got hit. And I really felt like David Bannister turning into the Incredible Hulk. I was like, you know, I was just like that, you know. And what I wanted to do was go in there and wake her up. What I wanted to do is shake her awake and say, "Look what you did." But I didn't. And I'm shaving. I'm thinking, I can't believe that she didn't put the dilly dauber down. And later I'm showering. Why in the world would somebody say she loves me and she doesn't want to put the dilly dauber? And I'm driving to work later in the day, and I'm thinking, you know, if she asked me to do anything for her, I would do it. I mean, something as simple as a dilly dauber I would do. And somewhere along the way, I started having this thought, I don't think she really loves me. We've been married 30 years. And I was having these kind of crazy thoughts because of this, right? But what I've learned from this work is that usually, somewhere along the way, we pick up a wound in our life to our identity. And whenever we get triggered really big, whenever we have like a 10, when our response should be a 2, then that is about me and some wound in my life. So I did some work with myself around where in my life have I felt this yucky black sludge stuff in my chest and felt like I wasn't ever loved, like I wasn't loved. And it took me back to a time when I was about 5.5 years old. And I'm sitting in a squad car. I've got my arm around my little brother. And out of the corner of my eye, I can see a lawman talking to my dad. My dad has some blood on him on the porch. And my mom is being put in the ambulance, and she's wrapped up where she can't move, but she's screaming. And it was near the end of a week that was very dangerous in my house as a little boy when my mom had a psychotic break, and it got dangerous. And for some reason, it took me back there because I was feeling like I'm taking care of here. I'm trying to take care of dad. I'm trying to take care of mom and try to keep things from happening, but nobody's taking care of me. Therefore, something's wrong with me. I am unlovable. Most of the time, I turned 50 in February. Most of the time in my life, whenever I have big emotion, I feel the black sludge and it comes back to that story. Does that make sense? Yeah. But because that old wound, even though I can tell it now without tears because I've done enough work, it's still a part of who I am. There's a little boy in me who needs to know that God loves him and that he was born lovable. It's the right of every person born to be loved. Are you following me? So, this is at the core of the work that we're doing with these women. Is that not about the dilly dauber, but is trying to help them tell their story, get in touch with the body as they tell their story, follow that pain back wherever it may go, do work with that little part of her, whatever that little part is. Do work with that little part, bring blessing and healing and love there, and see how that changes the affect of her memory in that moment. And then bring her back to the part where deal with the cognitive distortion around her identity. Bring her back to the moment that she was telling, all in that safe spot, whatever that peaceful place is for her. And then to bring it to today. That's it. But it's layers. It's over. And so there are core wounds and there are multiple wounds to the identity. And so what we want to do is help them recreate that memory, whatever the memory that's coming to them. And if you don't know this, if you haven't done enough of your own personal work to know, when you do work on one wound in your life, it's amazing how another wound might show up, that you couldn't see because this wound was blinding it. And that's what's happening. We get this one kind of cleared, and here comes it's not like it wasn't there, it was just they couldn't see it. And now here's this other one that we need to work on. So we do this over and over again. We recreate the memory, process the affect. What is that emotion? Where does it show up in your body? Always anchoring with the body. Work on the cognitive distortions, not only about life and the cognitive distortions that would fit with the science in CBT, but also the cognitive distortions around their core identity. Do this adult inner child negotiation. So there is a part of you that is not completely you that experienced that. And what can you share with that piece? Are you following me? And then do what we can to create life stabilization so that we bring them out of it. And now, whenever they get triggered, what they can do in that moment that doesn't get them all the way back to that moment and the 10. All right, I went through that pretty quick. Questions? Did I confuse anyone? Anyone else? Anyone? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Yeah. I'm scared to do this, but I'm going to do it. So does anyone have like a relationship issue in their life that'd be willing to share with the room? And I'll walk you through it. You don't have to name any names. Anyone? Be a model for us down here. You're having a problem with somebody at work or a relative. Anyone? That would be the easiest way. Anyone want to point at a volunteer? Yeah, just any kind of disagreement or relation. Come on down. What is your name? Armida. Yeah, give her a round of applause, yeah. So so we don't do this exact thing with everyone, but I want to give you a taste of it, okay? So you are the bravest person in the room. Yes, nice to meet you. Thank you. So think about the other person and the problem that they're giving you, the challenge that they give you or whatever. Just think about that. Think about maybe some of the things that you think about that person, right? And close your eyes and really think about how that other person is getting in the way of the things you want in life, or somehow a problem or a barrier to you in some way. And feel where you're feeling that in your body. Where do you feel that in your body? Where does it show up? Shoulders, your jaw, your stomach, your back. That problem. Where do you feel it? Disappointed? And where in your body do you feel it? Does it cause you stress in your shoulders? You feel something in...
I even stressed.
Stress.
I feel worse.
You're stressed and it feels worse. Yeah. And so I would work longer to help her find it in her body, locate it. So what do you usually do? Well, let's do this. Go to a place in the room, go to a place on the stage that could represent what you usually do when you feel that way. No, just walk there. Just move somewhere. Yeah. What do you usually do? Well, let's just ask. What do you usually do to that person whenever they're doing that to you? When they make you feel stressed, what do you do?
I don't talk to them.
You just ignore them. So you kind of withdraw from them. So where could you stand, whether other than where you are, that could represent that? Go stand there. Could represent withdrawal. Yeah. Okay. So, when you withdraw from her, does she feel better? That's her over there that feels all that stress. Does she feel better, or Marana feel better when you withdraw?
I don't know about her. It's my sister.
Okay.
We don't live together, but we live here.
No, but when you withdraw from her, do you feel better? Less stress?
Yes.
Okay. And in some way, you kind of serve, this part of you that withdraws from her kind of serves as a protector for her. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. A form of protection. Okay. So now find another place up here on the stage that could represent you at your very best, and go stand there. Not here, but somewhere else. Anywhere in here. Anywhere on the stage. You at your very best. Okay. So do you remember Wonder Woman pose? Give me the Wonder Woman pose, You're invincible. You at your best. Yes! Do you see it? Yeah. And you standing in your best, like you on your best day, you being everything God meant for you to be, you being 100% you. Are you there? So I want to talk to you about these two parts of you. These two parts of you. Does that make sense? So this part that we had out a while ago was a stressed part because of a conflict with somebody important in your life, right? And she's stressed. And so this stressed person, what does she really want in that relationship? What does she want? This little stressed girl part of you, what does she want in the relationship? Instead of stress with your sister, she wants what? Okay. So you were talking to me about a little part of you over there that gets stressed when around your sister, you and your sister's conflict. And that little part of you, instead of being stressed with your sister, what does she want instead in the relationship than being stressed? What would she like?
She hoped my sister.
You, this part of you that gets stressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real positive.
She wants to have a positive relationship with
Good relationship.
a good relationship. So this part wants to be. So I know this is kind of funny and you've never done this before, but would you be willing to just tell her, as if that little girl part of you, just tell her that you think it's okay for her to want to have a good relationship with her sister. Would you tell her that?
Arminda, you must accept Amanda how she is and love her. Because it's your sister.
And is it okay for her to want to have a loving relationship with her sister? Tell her.
Arminda, Amanda is part of his life.
Yeah, she's part of your life.
Probably she never will change.
She may never change.
Probably she will never notice that she hurt you.
Yeah, she won't notice that she hurt you. But is it good for her to want a positive relationship? Would you tell her that it's good for her?
I mean, it's good for you to
Yeah.
have a good and healthy relationship with your sister.
And what does she already have inside of her, this Armanda little part, what does she have inside of her that'll help her get through this, that's good? What's good about Armanda? It's heart.
Amanda is good
You are good?
for you. Because you will feel better with no stress, with no pain.
Yeah. And how do you feel about this little girl part? Do you love her? You do? Yeah? Could you just say, I love you?
I love you.
I love you. That's good. And if you want to just go over there and give her an imaginary hug, you can, but you don't have to.
It's not easy.
Okay. Well, you can stay right there. You want to go?
I
good.
will do it for obedience, but not because I really want it, but I know it's better.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I want to talk to you also about this little part over here. This part of you that she comes online to protect you. And she protects you, she protects little Armanda she comes online to protect her by withdrawing. So can you see that, and sometimes this part is really helpful to Armanda because it helps her not feel the stress, right? So would you say some honoring words about this part? Say, thank you for helping me get through those rough times with my sister or something like that?
Talk it to me, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Arminda, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Protect you.
Thank you for doing this to protect her. Yeah. That's good. And sometimes this part probably gets in the way of her really having the relationship she wants. So I wonder if you'll come back over here real quick, and we'll wrap this up. So this is a part of you, and this is a part of you. And you're in charge of these parts. So whenever this little girl shows up that wants to have a relationship with her sister and forgets that it's good to want to have a relationship with her sister, but is all stressed out about it, and this part comes on, you get to decide how to take care of her. There's a little girl in you, right? Who wants to have a relationship with her sister. And whenever she doesn't get it, you get stressed out and you withdraw. But you get to choose, instead of letting her get stressed out and withdraw, you can remind yourself of what a good person you are and that it's good to want to have a relationship with your sister. And whether she ever becomes your friend again, whether she ever really has a relationship with you again, that doesn't change what's true about you, that you are good. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah. So close your eyes right now and check out anything that you're feeling in your body, knowing that you are good and that you have some influence in these two things. Check out what's going on. Where do you feel that in your body? What does it feel like?
Pain.
Oh, the pain of this part?
Because I remember all the situations that we have.
The challenges? Yeah.
Yeah.
So open your eyes again. We're not going to be able to get to this in this demonstration. So I see your tears. See your tears. So remind yourself of you at your best, because that's where you're standing. Can you put yourself in that pose again? And touch that? Would you be willing to visit with me after the session? Okay. Would you all give her a round of applause? I'm sorry, honey. Yeah. Thank you. What bravery. We didn't get everything done. But that's what I'm talking about, the different parts. Now, I mean, there are a lot of parts, right? And I was pushy with her because I'm trying to get it done in a short time period. But we got out 2-3 parts of her. And there was a blessing part, an adult talking to her inner child here, and an adult talking to the protector part of her here. So not every time we do this, or do we even do what we did right there. Like sometimes you're just sitting in an office having this. Sometimes you're in an office moving them around. Sometimes we just have, whenever she touches that, what she just did, we might trace that back to the earliest memory. So think about a leverage. Let's see, a lever. Time is like the fulcrum. The closer you get the fulcrum to the side, the more power you have, the less energy it takes to really make big change in the core identity. So if you can regress it back as early as you can actually make great impact. Are you following me? Did I confuse you with that? Are you following? Okay. So this is what we're talking about, and we follow them. We go where they want to go. We'll challenge them and give them opportunity to see it earlier, but we go at their pace. So what I demonstrated was not fully following and in the pace. Okay. Any other question before I go on?
Okay, I do something like that, and that person goes to
Yes.
Your trust is coming. The kid doesn't feel safe with his sister still. So even though you're taking her back, okay, your
Right.
sister is a safe person, like you're building trust in the relationship to help them heal. Her sister is safe to her.
Right.
Does it make sense? I mean, this is a big
Yeah. So even if she chooses not to have a relationship anymore, to honor the part of her that wants, we're talking about you like you're not here. To honor the part of her, for her to honor the part of her that really wants the relationship is good. And that's where we can do some identity work around how good she is, right? We would have played that, I would have played that to the nth degree. And sometimes, not just sometimes, frequently, what we'll do is we'll actually let her, now that she's blessed that little part, we'll flip her in and let her receive that little part, which means you got to scribe what she's blessing. And then to honor this part of her that's about protection. So these people, these women, have been through horrendous things, and they did horrible things to survive. And the shame around what they did to survive by our culture and by themselves is not honoring what they did. The thing that they did might have been horrible, but they had to do it to survive. And so we need to honor that part of who they were. So still on the second phase, we want to development of the reconstructed memories. We want to understand and anchor memories, always anchoring memories in their body and as best we can to time. By the way, old wounds aren't stored chronologically, right, in our emotional part of it, and they're not always accurate, right? So their reality of that wound is where we want to do the work, not some other information that their mom told us that was more correct or whatever. Ability to maintain regulated affect to the anchored memories, so helping them maintain their calmness throughout the process. So not when they're here and not when they're there, but when they're there, helping them stay in a peaceful place. Understanding and processing body memory. Psychoneuroimmunology. How the mind affects the brain that affects the body. But we also are learning that what happens to the body also affects the brain and affects the mind. So it comes around. Understanding and identifying the cognitive distortions and helping them come to the realization that is that accurate, is that real in life. And then ego state work, which is that inner child work that we spoke to. Negotiating the parts of the self, and then also working to start putting them back into a whole. And honoring the survival coping mechanisms. We've already spoke to that. Let's move to stage 3. So stage 3 is in a place where in life, usually they are already, they might be, so this lady had gone, the story I told you, Jasmine, she had been to a dentist and got that taken care of. She was taking care of herself physically. She had studied to be a cosmetologist. She was working on her first job. And whenever we started this, so this was almost 2 years, a year and a half down the way. So forgiveness, awareness, presence, and image of God, the merging of all the parts, developing insight and awareness so that they can navigate in themselves without a counselor going forward, and then integrating into life. So what we want to do is whatever recovery they've been on, they will usually say thank you for all that you've done. And really, I say the same thing to everyone I help, and that is, you did the hard work, right? You did this work. We want them to feel the confidence of the journey that they've been on and where they've been able to get to. Developing forgiveness of self. So forgiveness is a process, not an event, but sometimes an event can be helpful for the process. So having a process that includes giving up something or burning something or whatever, also having a date on the calendar that this is the time when that they choose, that I'm going to move. That's my decision day to move differently in forgiveness and be open to peace. Identifying awareness of God and ability to process the distortions of God. So we, as children, some of our first glimpses and thoughts of God come from whom? Our parents. Yeah, it's not what we read about God or what the Bible class teaches us if we're in a regular religious education. It's what we're seeing in our life that we frequently we take what we experience of that and throw it on the face of God, if that makes sense. And so there are many distortions of God that happens where somebody that we thought was important in our life, we put on the face of God. And that could have been the very evil person that was their pimp. Are you following me? And so they see God as that kind of controlling, damning, whatever. And so helping them process those distortions of God and normalizing that for what they've been through so that they can... a phrase that we frequently use is, does that voice sound like the true, loving, merciful, gracious God or not? Does it? And let them decide if it does. And then ability to receive forgiveness from God. Here again, all of this is in the body. I lived most of my life knowing I was forgiven, but not feeling it. Until I did wound work, then I was able to receive grace here that had already been given, I think, theologically, and that I knew of up here. Helping them do that. Merging of all the separate parts, experiencing safety and empowerment, mastery of affect states and external exposure. So giving them opportunities to take risks to do this. Knowing that they can run back to us, giving them opportunities to experience that. And in that way, they begin to trust themselves and their power as they begin to step out and be totally free from all the service needs. And then internal and external resource functioning, looking at my life, what I have to be able to accomplish my life, what I have within me, what I have around me, and then externally to me, what are the institutions and other support that I need to be able to reach my goals and objectives in life. So 2.5 years after I met Jazz, she sent me a note through the staff, Mr. Roy. I have the opportunity to go to Thailand to visit children who are being trafficked. Would you help support? I'm going with this church. Would you help support my thing? Who wouldn't support that gal? Right? Right? Probably the only one who can come close to saying, I know what you've been through. I know what you're going through in some level. And so it really came full circle with her. Here are some ongoing issues in the field. I just want to bump these. First, it's a rapidly evolving and moving field. We are building the plane as we fly it, literally, trying to make things work. Clinical needs frequently thought of as a lower need in the early days of rescue. And it seems like every other week I have somebody else approach me and they say, Roy, I've got an idea. I want to do something in human trafficking. I want to make a difference. I'm thinking about a 501c3 and it's somebody who runs an insurance company or, but their heart's good and they want to do something. And this is where we start a lot. And then So they don't think about clinical needs until they get into a mess, if that makes sense. So that's what's happening in the field a lot. Clinical needs provided throughout the geographic area without collaborative learning. So would you mind raising your hand if you've ever worked with one of these folks, this population? Yeah, we got 1, 2, 3. Incest survivors, yeah. So why I ask that is there are folks who are serving this population who aren't connected with any other groups of counselors, and so we're not being able to take what they're learning into what we know. Does that make sense? And we don't have kind of like a gathering of clinicians all sharing with each other what's working and what's not working. We do have a group, like I have 8 counselors who pretty much this is what they do. Human traffic survivors, working with human traffic survivors. We've got some that are in the facilities, and so they don't office with us, and so, but we share our information with each other. And then we continue to need to build on an international knowledge base for those who are recovering from complex trauma. So all those. Let me challenge you too around complex trauma. If you're a Katrina evacuee and you moved to Houston and you survived a flood, and then you survived the tax day flood, and then you survived the last flood, I think you might be a complex trauma survivor. Does that make sense? And so it's not just human trafficking that is complex trauma. Some of our war heroes have experienced complex trauma.